For this last session of the Widening the Pipeline Fellowship Program, I'm introducing you to a woman I met on Twitter. So there's still some value left in Twitter.
Pre-RIP.
If you're judicious about it, okay. But I opened it one day, and one of the first posts I saw was by Phoebe, and I think it was right when you were getting laid off.
Yeah.
At Vox. Tell them what your title was at Vox.
I was Executive Director of Talent and Development at Vox.com.
The tweet said, I started preparing for being laid off the first day I started at Vox. And I thought, now, some might say that's negative thinking. That's like, setting yourself up for failure, or, you really weren't into it and you weren't giving it your all. But as I read her tweet string, I realized what she was talking about. Every step along the way in your career, you are prepared for whatever's going to happen to you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So why don't we start here by giving us some background on your career, and then take it away and give us your presentation.
Sure. So I kind of slipped and fell and rolled down a hill into journalism. I started in the nonprofit space, but I was writing a lot about issues affecting veterans, because I'm a veteran myself, had a very difficult transition to civilian life. And so I had a lot of passion for helping people connect with the resources that would help them make better decisions, live better lives, have fuller, more healthy, balanced lives. And I started doing that in the nonprofit space, focusing on my community, the veteran community. Eventually, I realized that I really wanted to spend more time creating. I wanted to spend more time writing, and I kind of entered into like the baby blogosphere, because I'm an old lady, so baby internet, when we were still figuring out, that we were still deciding where does blogging fit in journalism. We hadn't really made that decision as an industry. And so I started on the blogging side, and then I realized, oh wait, deadlines are hard. And I decided to transition from writing regularly and blogging regularly for a media publication to working on the audience development side. And I found that to be the perfect mix of the creativity that I was searching for in writing with the analytical side that I've always loved about using data-driven ways to connect with audiences. And so I was able to put those things together. And that is where my sort of journalism career really began. I worked in nonprofit media, and it was very mission driven, and it was incredibly energizing, but it was also incredibly draining. And I got to a point where I realized that I didn't really have space in my life I didn't have enough emotional energy for my community anymore. I was giving it all to my job. And I wanted to find a way to stay in the work that I was doing that I found very enjoyable, but do it in a way that was less costly energetically. And so I switched from nonprofit media that was very mission oriented to working in a business publication that you might have heard of, Quartz. And that was a much better shift for me. And it made a lot more sense for where I wanted to be in my career, what I needed from my life at the time. But I also started realizing that there was going to be a point where I wasn't going to want to do this kind of work anymore. And I wanted to know what that chapter was going to look like before I needed to enter it. And so I was on a parallel. I was doing my job, giving my best to my job, doing the very, very best work, but also in my personal time, starting to explore some of the things that felt good to me as potential next chapters. And one thing that I've done over the course of my entire career is lots and lots of mentorship, sponsorship, and coaching. And again, that goes back to that beginning part where I had a very difficult transition to civilian life. And the essential ingredient to success for me was connecting with a mentor who helped me connect with the kinds of resources and thought processes and mindset and habits and practices that would set me up for a much better mental orientation from a mental health perspective, but also a better professional orientation. And I know I'm jumping back and forth quite a bit because there's lots of threads that come together. And one of them was in 2015, my first little blogging job I got laid off from, and that was in 2015. We've had lots of algorithm changes to all of the different social media platforms that have caused all sorts of problems for publications. And this one in 2014, at the end of 2014, was the reason why I and many other people in media got laid off in 2015 because it was a huge chunk of traffic that disappeared overnight when Facebook made a big algorithm change. At that point in my life, I was not prepared for what would happen if I got laid off. I didn't have any savings. I hadn't invested in my professional brand, hadn't invested in my network. I was just kind of winging it, playing with it, seeing what happens. And, I was a little baby, I didn't know. And I was a first generation professional. I come from a low income background. My parents were wonderful, but they couldn't teach me, like, this is how you succeed in corporate life, because they didn't know. And what ended up happening was I got laid off in 2015. I was out of work for 4 months. I racked up $15,000 or so in credit card debt while trying to close the gap between the little bits of freelance work that I wasn't prepared to go and get. Until I just so happened to get so lucky to have a one-off conversation with a person who knew someone, and that ended up turning into a job. And so by accident, I was able to exit that personal financial crisis, but not without quite a bit of wound. And at the end of that, I made a commitment to myself. I'm never going to get caught flat-footed again. I cannot depend on these companies to take care of me, and I cannot depend on chance to be the reason why I survive and thrive. I have to set myself up for that. And that is why every single day I was always thinking, what is the thing that I can do to be really great at my job today? And what is the thing that I can do to have a resilient career forever? And today we're going to talk about 3 things that I consider the pillars of professional resilience that make your career layoff-proof. Now, one of the things that is really important to remember is that layoff-proofing is like waterproofing. You don't waterproof your boots to keep it from raining, because that's not how life works. And you don't layoff-proof your career to keep yourself from getting laid off, because that's not how capitalism works. You waterproof your boots so that they don't get damaged when it rains. And you layoff-proof your career so your career doesn't get damaged when you get laid off. And so today, that's what we're going to be talking about.
And so you see now why her company is now betterwithphoebe.com, right?
That's me.
So y'all line up behind me for the coaching that I'm going to be asking her for. So why don't, at this point, we let you take it away?
Okie doke. All right, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. Okay, the slides are a little secondary. There's a lot of text on them, but so they're meant to be used as a reference. And so don't worry if you can't read them, because you are going to receive them and you can refer back to them later. And I will make sure to highlight the important parts. So this part we've kind of already gone over. Like, the year has been really, really brutal. And I heard a little bit, when I came in a little bit earlier, heard a bit of your previous conversation where there's a lot of anxiety about the layoffs. And that totally makes sense. This is a time where we are all in focus in this idea that there is no such thing as job security. That is a fiction. That is a myth that does not actually exist, because companies hire jobs to solve problems. And if they can't solve the problem, either because the job isn't solving the problem or they can't afford the job anymore, they will get rid of the job. And that has nothing to do with you. It does have nothing to do with your value. It has nothing to do with how good you were at the job. It has to do with capitalism doing capitalism. And so you have to look out for yourself by investing regularly in your own professional resilience, so that if we end up in a uncomfortable, stressful, difficult emotional season, economic season as we are in now, you know that if something happens, you are going to be okay. Now, this is something that you have to build over time, and it's not something that happens overnight. You can start building it now. You are here, which means you are already building it. But if you keep that mindset in mind as you move forward, you're never going to get caught flat-footed. You're always going to be in a position where you can make a pivot if you need to make a pivot. And so, again, I got caught up in the layoffs early this year. I was laid off on January 20th from my full-time job at Vox.com. And ultimately, that was capitalism doing capitalism. I didn't know at the time, but Vox Media was in the middle of a fundraising round. And one of the things that happens when companies need to raise money from big venture capital capitalists or rich people who need something to do is that they will make sure that their books look as good as possible, that their expenses are as low as that they can be, that their revenue is as high as they can be, so that they can project either profitability or being very close to profitability. And that It seems to be, because news came out later, that they succeeded in raising a round of funding from a venture capital firm, that one of the reasons why they decided to do some layoffs at the beginning of the year was to make those books look better, to close that deal. Now, that's not about me. I did my job really well. I was really good at my job. They decided that in order to make those books look good, that they needed to get rid of mine and several other jobs. That has nothing to do with me. But because I started preparing to be layoff-proofing my career in 2015, it was a very emotionally difficult experience. It was a very stressful and anxiety-inducing experience, but it did not crater my finances the way that it did in 2015. I was able to activate my network and have lots of opportunities to choose from. And I also had, and this is unique to me, it's not going to be the case for everyone, but I also had a side hustle, my coaching business, that I could lean on as a full-time income if I wanted to. And that was not something I built overnight. Again, I got laid off in 2015, and I made a commitment then. I'm going to do a little bit every once in a while to make sure that I'm building up that resilience into my career. And so I want to talk about the 3 pillars of professional resilience. Having sufficient savings, that's the first one. Having a robust network, that's the second one. And then the third one is having marketable skills. We're going to break these 3 pillars down into 3 really important concepts. And remember, you will get these slides afterward, and we're going to go into each of them. Now, the other reason why this is really important to do is because it's not just about layoffs. All of us have either been in or heard about terrible jobs. And sometimes if you are in a terrible job, you feel trapped in that terrible job because you don't have enough savings to leave, because you don't have the kind of network that you can activate to access opportunities more easily, or because your skills haven't developed in a way that makes it easy for you to find that next role. And so building professional resilience is not just about dealing with difficult economic moments where layoffs are possible or imminent or have happened. It's also about giving you control over your career, having it be more stable, have it be more reflective of your priorities as those evolve and change over the course of your life, so that you don't feel chained to your job, that you don't feel chained to an employer, you don't feel chained to your paycheck. Again, this is a long-term game. We're thinking long-term here. You're starting today and then moving forward by making these investments. I'm going to talk about savings, and so I have to give a disclaimer. I am not a licensed financial expert. I am a former poor kid, and I spend a lot of time learning about personal finance because I would like to never be a poor kid again. And so I have learned a lot, and I am not in a position to give you financial advice, but I do recommend that if you are interested in learning about tactics around personal finance, that you invest in speaking with a financial expert who is licensed. But I am going to give you a couple of tips. So the first one, the 3 tips that we're going to talk about when it comes to learning, building sufficient savings are unlearning bad money habits, increasing your earnings, and then building your financial literacy over time. So let's dive into those. First, we want to talk about building your financial literacy. Now, this ties back to what I was talking about before. I am not a licensed professional financial expert. I am a former poor kid who is still learning every single day, and I would encourage you to make a point of learning as well. We absorb a lot of stories about money that can make us think that it is too hard, it is intimidating, it is bad, I am a bad person if I have it, or if I learn about it, or if I spend a lot of time thinking about it. And I would encourage you to identify if any of those things are happening in your head and make a point of building in high quality financial information into your day-to-day media diet. That could be following quality publications or quality experts on social media, subscribing to a few newsletters. If you're a YouTube person, like subscribing to some YouTube channels, just making sure that like a little bit is getting in here and there on a regular basis, because the mere exposure to high quality financial information is going to help you make better decisions. Eventually, you are going to get to a point where it makes more sense to be more intentional about these things, and you may want to actually seek out a licensed financial expert. Important thing to think about with reaching out to a licensed financial expert, there's 2 of them. First is that it is not as expensive as you might think it is. As a former poor kid, I thought that like financial advisors were something that rich people had and rich people did, and they're very expensive. They are certainly those things, but they're not necessarily expensive. There are lots of financial experts who specialize in helping people who are early in their earning journey or in the middle of their earning journey, and do so at a rate that is affordable. And so don't assume that working with an expert is something that you can't afford. Look into it, confirm whether you can find a quality expert that is in your budget, because spending some time with that person can change your life. The second thing that I encourage you to do as you are going through that journey of researching is pay attention to how these people are getting paid. if follow the money is something that we all know to do. Follow the money when it comes to a financial expert that you might work with. You want to know how they're getting paid, because that is going to change the kind of advice that they give you, and whether that is truly in service of you or if it is actually in service of them. So the next thing I think is really important, this is probably the most important one, and I think that people don't talk about this enough, is that you really need to understand what your money habits are, what your money motivations are, what your money hangups are, because those beliefs change the way that you use money, change the way that you earn money, change the way that you spend and save money. And ultimately, we work for money. And so the more money that you have, the more freedom you have in terms of how you earn money. If you have money in the bank, you don't have to be terrified about what's going to happen if the economy is doing whatever the economy is doing, or if a company is secretly raising money and who knows what's going to happen next. If you have money in the bank, it's easier for you to feel more flexibility and more comfort in the uncertainty that you might be experiencing. So I want to give a specific example of how to do this and how much of a difference it can make in your ability to earn, save, and spend money better. So again, I have referred to myself as a former poor kid, because that is what I am. I grew up very low income. I was on food stamps. I was on housing assistance. Like, I did not grow up with money. My parents were, my mom was a cleaner, my dad was a plumber, and they did their best for me, but they could only teach me what they knew. And there were lots of things that they did not know. And what they taught me, the model that I saw from them, is that money is hard to get. If you have it, you need to hold on to it, because you don't know when you're going to get more of it, and that no one is going to help you. That is what I learned from the model of growing up in my parental situation. Another layer to that was that I grew up while I was low income. My parents were not high earners. I grew up in an area where there were lots of high earners. And so they worked in service jobs, sort of supporting these people's wealthy lifestyle. So I saw lots of wealthy people doing wealthy people things. And a model that I absorbed from that is that people will only treat you nicely if you look like you have money. And so the two things that happened because of those experiences that I grew up with is that I grew up thinking that money was going to be hard to come by, but the only way that people would respect me is if I looked like I had money. So the first few years of my earning life, before I learned better, I bought a lot of things to impress people who did not care about me, that I could not afford, that put me in credit card debt. And it wasn't until I learned, oh, the reason why I do that is because those rich white people were mean to my parents, but nice to each other. And I need to unlearn that, or I'm going to keep buying things that I can't afford to impress people who do not care about me. And so that is a process that I encourage you to really think of and go through that journey on your own. What are the lessons? What are the models? And what are the messages that you received about money? And how do they shape the way that you interact with money and your career right now? The next thing that I would love for you to think about is ways of increasing your earnings. So a lot of times personal finance information is all about how to save money, how to invest money, but it doesn't do very much to tell you how to make more money. If your pie is this big, you can only slice it so many ways, and buying store brands and skipping lattes is stupid advice and does not help you move forward professionally and move forward in your earnings. And so you have to think strategically about the things that you can do to increase your earnings. And these things which things are going to be comfortable for you, that are going to feel authentic and aligned with who you want to be and how you want to live your life and how you want work to sit in your life. But how do you increase your earnings? Because that is the way to make the pie bigger. And we're going to spend the rest of the conversation talking about that. And the most important one from my perspective is building your network. And you're here, which is really exciting, because that means that you have a big old network that you can lean on now and in the future if you do the work to maintain it. And so we're going to talk about a few ways to broaden and deepen your network consistently over time so that you can benefit from getting access to what I call the shadow job market. There are two job markets. There's a public job market that is driven by job boards and careers pages. And then there's the shadow job market that is driven by reputation and relationships. If you have really fantastic skills, you can apply to jobs on the public job market, and you will have access to this many opportunities. If you have a really great network and you have those great skills, you are going to have more access to more opportunities. Because where are people hearing about jobs before they get posted? Where are people getting to speak to the hiring manager before anyone else does? Who is getting given more flexibility in the application process, who is being given more priority or speed in the application process, who is getting bigger job offers, people who are coming in through the shadow job market. And the only way you can access the shadow job market is through relationships and reputation. So let's talk about that. So I like to think about it in terms of you need to have a really good professional pitch. And this is maybe something that you already covered in your time in your fellowship. Having a really good professional pitch is super important if you are going to build relationships and reputation, have better access to the shadow job market. And I think of that as having 3 pieces. The first is a highly discoverable LinkedIn profile. Now, LinkedIn used to be like the thing where we just sort of like added random people that we saw at conferences, but it has over the last 3, maybe 5 years become the most important recruiting tool on the internet. And so if your LinkedIn is a wasteland, then you are going to have a really hard time having a resilient career. It is super important for you to have a highly discoverable LinkedIn. Now, why do I say highly discoverable? I say highly discoverable because a lot of times we think of LinkedIn as our digital Rolodex, the place where we sort of store all of our professional contacts, but that is not how recruiters think about LinkedIn. Recruiters think about LinkedIn like a search engine. They are using it to find candidates, and they cannot find you if you are not discoverable. If your LinkedIn is a wasteland, recruiters and hiring managers who are trying to find talent to fill their roles are not going to be able to find you. So start with really investing in your LinkedIn, making sure that it is in the best possible condition that it can be. And that is going to increase the inbound interest that you receive from recruiters and hiring managers. You are off on a beach somewhere and you come back to your email 3 days later and there's an email from a recruiter about a job that you did not know about at a company that you would like to work at. That sounds great, doesn't it? That only happens if you have a really discoverable LinkedIn. Now, you have to respond to that email and you have to send over your resume. And so your resume should always be in good condition. You should always have like an 80% resume, something that's only going to take you 15, 30 minutes to customize, zhuzh up a little bit and send over to that recruiter or that hiring manager, because when they reach out to you, that is when they are the most likely to do something with your application. So it shouldn't take 2-3 days, an entire weekend for you to turn over a resume. It should be something that you can do same day. And if your resume is ready for that, where it only takes you 15 or 30 minutes to get it ready, you can send it over right away. They can send it over to the hiring manager, and the hiring manager can get you on the calendar for the opportunity that you've been thinking about that you didn't even know about. And then the third thing is going to be, you need to have a really tight elevator pitch. You need to have a really good 3 to 5 sentence paragraph that you can sort of spout off at the drop of a hat that explains who you are, what you do, why you do it well, and why you do it at all. And that's going to be really important as a foundation for your overall interview strategy. If you have a really good elevator pitch, it's going to have those elements that you can keep drawing from as they ask you all of those random questions that they always ask in an interview. If you're able to tie that back to your elevator pitch over and over and over again, then the elements of your elevator pitch are the things that they remember about you after the interview is over. A really important thing to remember about interviews that we all know, which is why we take such good notes when we're interviewing subjects, is that human brains are not great at remembering all the things that someone tells us in an interview. And so when you are interviewing for a job, having that really great interview elevator pitch that starts the conversation, that frames the conversation, that's that lead, that nut graph of the interview, that is going to be really important to make sure that they remember what you want them to remember about you. And all of that starts with knowing what you want to say about yourself, which is essential to having a really good LinkedIn. So all of those things come together to create a really great professional pitch to make it easier for you to attract inbound opportunities and then turn those inbound opportunities into opportunities that are available and in your hand that you can choose to take part in or not. So that bit is really about inbound opportunities. If you are looking for opportunities, then you have to be out there networking. You have to be out there talking to people. And commonly, very, very commonly, people find networking kind of anxiety inducing. It feels awkward. It feels intimidating. Lots of different feelings around networking. Networking nerves is very, very common. Even for someone like me who has been networking for years and years and years and years, who gets up on stage and gives presentations, still gets nervous about networking. And so it's okay to be nervous. It's not okay to be so nervous that you don't do it and you aren't in a position to access the shadow job market. You need to know what to do with your nerves so that you can take action anyway. And so practice is going to be the most effective thing to help you deal with your nerves. The more you practice networking and then realize that, okay, nothing terrible happens, the world doesn't burn down, It is okay. And sometimes I even get really great opportunities. That makes it a lot easier for you to deal with your networking nerves. And so I want to give you some guidance on how to practice more in a way that has a high likelihood of success. That's going to build that sort of database in the back of your mind that networking is okay, networking is worth it. Even if it makes me feel anxious, I'm going to do it because good things happen when I network. So building your own unique networking habit should always start with your current and former colleagues, because those are the people who know you best. Those are the people who already know you, already have a relationship with you, already think highly of you, already think well of you, and also aren't going to be surprised to hear from you, are very likely to respond and be willing to have a conversation, whether that is a text conversation, an email, a Slack, a Zoom, in person. Like, these are people who are very, very likely to say yes. And so getting some practice, asking these folks if they're willing to have these sorts of conversations with you is a really great place to start. Now, with former colleagues, one of the things that people, my coaching clients have a lot of anxiety about is like, oh, I haven't talked to this person in 3 years. How awkward. I'm just going to show up and ask them for a networking conversation. That's so weird. It's not weird. If that person had a good experience working with you, they're going to be delighted to hear from you. Oh my gosh, it's been 3 years. That's so crazy. How are you? That's what the response is going to be. And so it's really a really great place to start are going to be those folks that are kind of like stale contacts where you knew each other, you worked with each other well, and then you kind of fell off. And opening the conversation as being mutual. I would love to hear what's going on with you and tell you a little bit about what's going on with me is a way to sort of take out some of the extractive nature of networking that can kind of feel really transactional and uncomfortable and inauthentic. Because if you had a good working relationship with them 3 years ago, you probably do want to know what's going on with them. And so that's a really great place to start. And the thing that you will notice is that when you talk to your current colleagues and when you talk to your former colleagues and those relationships refresh and they turn into opportunities, you're going to be a lot more willing to take the step into our next zone, which is trade groups and associations. And this we've already done a really great job of taking advantage of. I encourage you to continue doing so after this fellowship is complete. Continue to engage with professional organizations and trade groups, because they can be really great places to learn about the craft, and they can be really great places to build and deepen professional relationships. And again, because you have this thing in common, we are members of the thing, it makes it a lot easier for you to start that conversation. Hey, we're both here in this room together for a reason, let's talk. Again, bring that mutuality into the conversation. I'd love to hear what's going on with you and share what's going on with me is a really great way to start the conversation, have it be collaborative, have it be mutual, have it be reciprocal, as opposed to it being extractive. And then another one that I really love is informal online communities. Lots of really fantastic informal online communities have popped up where people have connected and assembled around identities, around certain types of work, around industries. Sometimes they can be really, really super specialized, and sometimes they're more broad, but they are often places where very vibrant, up-to-date, frank conversations are happening about the work, about the intersection of the work and the identity, and all sorts of other things that can be lots of fun, but can also be really great places to meet people. Now, if you decide to join an informal online community, I encourage you to be a wallflower for a little bit, see what the dynamic is, because they usually have cultures, like the community has its own culture, and there's going to be an expectation that you align with that culture in some way if you're going to get best results. And so hang out a little bit, see how the party is moving before you jump in and start talking to people. But again, look for that mutuality. I'd love to hear what's going on with you. I'd love to share what's going on with me. Try to make that message as mutual and as reciprocal as possible. Okay, I want to talk about the importance of doing this over time. You might be inspired after this presentation because I'm such a good presenter to get out here and start networking. I want to network with everybody. My network's gonna be huge. But that's not really sustainable. And so I would encourage you, if you're going to have compound benefits require time. And so you do want to make sure that you are being sustainable about the way that you network. Now, for me, I find it better to network on a weekly basis and to just sort of have a slot in my calendar or a reminder that comes up that says, hey, did you do any networking things this week? Maybe you should do a networking thing. And so I have a calendar invite that shows up every Wednesday. Well, today, it's on a different day today. And I used to be on Fridays. I switched it up because my life changed, and that's okay. But if you integrate something into the task management or time management system that you use for your life, if you integrate those reminders or that reserved time and space into the system you already use, that is going to make it more sustainable for you so that it's something that you can do over time. So like I said, I have my recurring invite that shows up every Wednesday at 2 p.m. And it's just 15 minutes. And it's like, hey, did you do a networking thing? It is literally called, did you do a networking thing? And in that 15 minutes, if I did not do a networking thing, I go over to LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn is in the invite notes, and I find a person who I haven't spoken to in a while, and I say, hey, how you doing? What's going on with you? I'd love to tell you a little bit about what's going on with me. Period, send. If I send one of those every single week, that's 52 messages. How many conversations will come out of that? How many opportunities could come out of that? Sending one message a week could completely change your life. And how much time does that take? It took me maybe 5 minutes to set up that invite, maybe another 5 to move it from Friday to Wednesday when I realized Friday didn't work for me, and then maybe 5 minutes a week, maybe 10 minutes if I'm having a hard time finding someone, to find someone in LinkedIn, send them the template that is also in the invite on my calendar, and follow up with that person afterward. And so find the way to do it that is sustainable for you. Now, once you send that template off, which may feel like, oh, it's kind of robotic and inauthentic, what happens after that is the part that's supposed to be authentic. The part before that is supposed to be easy so that it actually happens. Another thing that I do that I find really helpful, if any of you use apps for your to-do list, I use an app for my to-do list. I have a project in my to-do list app that is called People. And inside of that project are 60 tasks that are individual human beings that I want to make sure I don't forget about. I have 2 of them are mentors that have been really instrumental in my career, and they are in my to-do list as recurring tasks. Every 3 months, they pop up on my list along with go buy milk and pay your life insurance or whatever. And I see that along with all the other things that I need to do that day. And I am reminded, hey, that is someone that you want to be a good connection to. Send them a message. Another thing that is really helpful for doing it that way, which might be unique to the app that I use, which is Todoist, which is to-do list with no L, is that there's lots of space for comments. And so if the things that I want to remember about these people that my brain is just not capable of retaining, I put in those notes so that when I send them a follow-up, I can say, hey, how are you doing? It's been a while since the last time we chatted. How's Spike the dog? I'm not going to remember Spike the dog 3 months later, but me sending that message mentioning Spike the dog is going to increase how that person feels about me. And I would like to remember that the dog's name is Spike, but my brain is not capable of that. And so outsourcing what my brain is not good at to something that is good at it allows me to be a good connection to my connections and a good friend to my friends. Because some of the people who are in my people project are my friends. I have a friend who's going through it right now, and she is in my to-do list as recurring invite, and it comes up a recurring task, and it comes up every day. And that means that no matter what is going on in my life, no matter whether I'm sick or I'm tired or my dogs are acting crazy, I remember to send her a little heart emoji and say, hey, I'm thinking of you, you're gonna get through this. And so it's not just about that method in particular, it's not just about being a good connection to my connections, but it's also about being a good friend to my friends. And so find ways to make networking sustainable for you. Break it into little tiny pieces so that it doesn't feel intimidating. And when you catch yourself in some sort of emotional reaction, oh, I'm intimidated, I'm anxious, what if this happens? I don't wanna. Remind yourself of what happened the last time you networked. Find the story of when you did it and it went well and it presented an opportunity for you, and use that as inspiration to push through the difficult emotion, whatever it is. Okay, our last pillar is marketable skills. So there are 3 elements of marketable skills that I encourage people to think about. The first is building your industry knowledge. The second is developing your functional skills, the skills that are core to what you do. And then the third is staying mindful and exploring your passions and interests. So let's go through those, and then we can open up for questions. So building your industry knowledge is really, really, really essential. This is an industry that moves very quickly, where there is lots of change, where what our audiences want, what funders want, what our advertisers want, what the top leaders at our organizations want changes. And if you are not on top of that, if you're not aware of how that intersects with the work that you are doing, the work that you have done in the past, and the work that you might do in the future, you're going to end up in a situation where your skills or your portfolio gets stale, and it's harder for you to access opportunity. And so make sure that you are staying on top of what's happening in the industry. Now, the easiest way to do this is just subscribe to some newsletters. If Neiman and Pointer are showing up in your inbox, every few days, you are going to at least be exposed to some of the things that are happening. Follow really good media reporters on your favorite platforms, whatever platforms that you use to sort of passively take in information, also income. Make sure that you are getting knowledge passively about what's happening in the industry so that can see that cue of like, oh wait, I need to take some time to go deeper. And know where the depth is. The depth is going to be in your trade associations and in your industry groups. The depth is going to be in your informal online communities. And so that effort that you put into networking and making sure that you were integrated into those communities also helps you understand, helps you more easily access information that will help you keep your skills current. The other thing that's really important is to make sure that you're investing in your own professional development. You're all here, so I don't need to bang on this one too much. But one thing that I do want to say that is a mindset shift that is really important, that I've had to sort of encourage a lot of my direct reports, a lot of my mentees, and certainly my coaching clients as well, is that you should not expect your company to develop you. You should not expect your manager to develop you. It is great when companies and managers invest in their people in that way, but it is always in service of the company's goals, of that manager's goals, of that manager creating a little mini-me that they can be very proud of. And so if their priorities are not aligned with your professional priorities, then you cannot expect them to develop you in the way that you want to be developed. You have to take charge of that. And so certainly ask for professional development. Talk to your manager, talk to HR, talk to if there's a learning department or something like that. Talk to those folks and see what opportunities are available. Please don't expect your manager to be a walking database on all of the professional development opportunities available in your company. That is not what their job is. That is HR's job. That is learning and development's job. They will have that information. So talk to your manager, but also talk directly to those folks and ask what is available. If there are things that are available that are aligned with your professional goals, engage in them. Treat them as work. They are presented to be a thing that you do at work. And so don't feel like I have to do the professional development thing like in my weekends and evenings. No, if it is something that your company is providing, it is work. Now, if your company, the opportunities that your company are providing are not aligned with your professional goals, ask if there is any room for customization. Would they be willing to send you to this place or allow you to get this certification or allow you to take this course, even though that's not on the list? Because sometimes they'll say yes. Sometimes they might say no, but they might say yes. And the only way you get that yes is if you ask. If they say no, you have to develop yourself. And I know that can be frustrating. I know that can be expensive. I know that can be time consuming. I know that can be energy draining. But at the end of the day, it's an investment in your future. And your future self is going to thank you for getting that certification that you feel like you need, but your company wasn't willing to pay for. Your future self is going to thank you for going to that conference that the company wouldn't pay you to go to, so you went on your vacation. If you invest in your own professional development, if you are the captain of your own professional ship, you go where you want to go. If you let the company be in charge of that, if you let your manager be in charge of that, you go where they want you to go. And that does not necessarily mean still at their company. Because remember, we are in a season where a lot of people are getting laid off, even if they invested in their professional development. So those investments are really about protecting your career, not protecting your job. Okay, last bit, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because if you're here, you are committed to this industry. But sometimes people want to explore other things. And so let's talk about how to do that. Think about your passions, your interests, the activities that you like to do in your spare time, and look for patterns. What do I like about salsa? What do I like about watching hours of beauty YouTube? What do I like about that? And is there something there that could help me craft the next chapter of my career if I believe this chapter of my career is coming to an end. That was really important for me. It's the reason why I'm a coach today. Once I got, in 2019, I started thinking like, okay, I'm a director of audience development. When I look up this ladder, it's not interesting. When I look across, it's kind of boring. I could go over and like do corporate marketing, and that just doesn't seem interesting. What's a different thing that I could do that I would still enjoy? And I spent all of 2019 just like here and there doing little things. Does this feel good? Does this feel good? How can I learn a little bit more about this industry? How can I learn a little bit more about this interest? What does the economy look like around this thing that I like? Are there opportunities there? And ultimately, I played with a lot of different things. Some of them were super random. I like took an esthetician class because I really like skincare. I was like, oh wait, I'm an introvert. I don't want to be in people's face all day. and playing with it, letting it be an experiment. Don't attach stakes to it. Let it be play. And eventually you will find the thing that sticks. And the thing for me that stuck is teaching people things. That is something that I have done throughout my entire career, and I love it so very much. It brings me so much fulfillment and joy. And when I realized, oh wait, that's a thing you can do for money, it was amazing. And it put me in a position where I could start building something on the side to figure out, well, what does that look like for me? What does teaching people things for money look like for me? And eventually I got to the point where it looks like career coaching. And that is why I'm able to be here with you today, despite getting laid off January 20th. So I'm curious if we have any questions. Hello.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Solis. I'm a reporter for the Nevada Current. What exactly does it mean to make your LinkedIn highly discoverable? How do we make our LinkedIn highly discoverable?
Have you been trained on SEO for your articles? Or I'm assuming that you work in a text context, and that might not be true. Have you been trained on SEO?
A bit.
Okay, so that's what it is. It's search engine optimization. And so, however, whatever you have learned about search engine optimization, that is true for your LinkedIn profile. So LinkedIn as a search engine is looking at your profile for words that match with LinkedIn's searchers, recruiters and hiring managers, who are looking for particular roles. And so if I put in LinkedIn, health reporter, psychology, LinkedIn is going to go through the LinkedIn universe and find people who have health, reporter, and psychology in their profiles in places. There are certain places that are prioritized, that are weighted more than others. How often and the different versions of that term that show up in the LinkedIn profile are going to make a difference as well. The links on the profile that go to other places are going to make a difference as well. It's just straight SEO. And so if you think about it in terms of getting on the search engine results page. And so the more optimized your profile is, the higher up in the search results you're going to show up for recruiters and hiring managers who are searching for you. But eventually, that human being is going to click on your profile and look at it. And if it looks great to the bot, but it looks like trash to a human, they're not going to call you back. And so you still also need to think about when they come to this profile, is it displaying a professional narrative that is cohesive, that is aligned with who I am now and who I want to become professionally? And does it inspire them to say, yes, this is somebody that I should call? And so I would encourage you to just start with the top half. Your header. Most people, I am 100% sure that at least 70% of you have no photo in your header. And then it's just like that weird gray shapes. Fix it. You can replace it. You can replace it with, a stock photo from like Unsplash that says something about the medium that you work in, or you can go to somewhere like Canva and actually use one of their templates to put together a header that is a really great introduction for you. You want to make sure your headline is good. You want to make sure your about section is good, and then you want to add some featured links in the features links section that either to your portfolio, if you have one, or work that really embodies the kind of work that you have done or want to do in the future. I could do like a whole half day on just like LinkedIn. We could talk about it forever, but I know we got more hands. And so.
Hi, Phoebe. I'm Jarrell. I'm at Vox.com right now.
Hey, friend.
Hi. And so something that I heard you say earlier is don't expect your job to develop you, right? But the job that I got at Vox was right in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. They wanted to hire journalists of color, bring them into the newsroom, develop them into journalists, so that they can go on and diversify media, but that didn't really happen. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that process, like how do you develop yourself when you're not being developed?
So I can give you more specificity, obviously, because I know. So you need to speak to the Learning and Development Department. They send regular emails about like the things that they do. But the people who work in that department are like, they're actually really nice people and nobody talks to them. And if you say like, I would like to talk to you about my goals and how that aligns with the programming that you guys have, they will talk to you and they will help you figure out what you should slot into I think they do it quarter by quarter, and what you should slot into your quarter to help you move forward in the way that you want to move forward. You should have this, once you have that conversation with L&D, have that exact same conversation with your manager and say, I talked to L&D about the things that they are doing, and I talked about my goals. The L&D is not gonna care what your professional goals are because their job is to help you reach them. And so you can be frank with them that like, this is the direction that I would like to go in. And then you can take that information to your manager and say, I talked to L&D, they recommended that I do these professional development things. Do you see any flags with me taking time to attend these workshops? And I would love to incorporate the things that I learn into some of our one-on-ones so that we could talk about how I'm integrating these skills into my day-to-day. Like that is you taking agency versus waiting for someone to provide that direction to you. And it's you taking ownership of the relationship that you have with your manager is something that like nobody tells you to do that or how to do that, but it is absolutely essential. It's one of those things that you kind of like figure out once you get into your first management role. They're like, oh wait, I need to be in charge of this. Because I have never been a manager before, I was expecting my manager to do this for me, but my manager, now that I'm a manager, isn't gonna do this for me. I need to figure out how to do this. But it is so useful to do at any point in your career because there are lots of people who have no interest in becoming people managers. So how else are they gonna learn? So really make a point of taking ownership over your one-on-ones, take ownership over the relationship that you have with your manager, and be proactive about getting that information from L&D or whatever equivalent if you are in a different organization. And assume that they're nice people who want you to be successful. And if that changes, if you get evidence that that is no longer the case, then you can change the way that you relate to them then. But expect them to behave as if they are in your corner and want you to be successful, like HR and L&D in particular, because these people's job is training. Their job is not like hiring and firing people and like salaries and all of that. If you have someone who is specifically in charge of learning and development and training, that's someone who wants you to be successful, and they are measured based on how many people participate in their programming. They are measured on how results improve based on the programming that they are providing. And so they are going to interact and invest in you in a very different way than if you just go to like a random HR person or even to your manager. I feel like I'm doing a really long answer. Go ahead.
I know, it's okay. Hi, it was a great answer. Hi, I'm Gabrielle.
Hi.
I'm from PolitiFact. I'm a fact-checking reporter. And so LinkedIn has not always been my friend. Like I updated to show I'm here at this current role. And my photo is old, but thank God it still matches the red hair that I have right now. So my question is, how often should I update my stories? I've noticed that actually people that I've interviewed will repost my stories onto their own LinkedIn. And so I think I should kind of hop onto that as well. But how often should I share stories and just to boost the optimization?
Yeah, so I would think about this in like 3 phases. So phase 1 is like fix it. The stuff that's just like messed up, like get it to like basic best practices. And that's something that you should like do like quickly within, the constraints that you are working with in your life. Try to get that done quickly. But then once that's done, you need to assess like for me and how I use LinkedIn, how frequently do I need to be updating things? I use LinkedIn for marketing my coaching business. So I need to be updating LinkedIn like twice a week at a minimum. And I'm not there yet, I'm trying, y'all. But if it's that sort of situation, then once a month is fine, so that if something public that you publish is like, this is the thing, this is it, then you like go ahead and like put that up. And then the more long-term updates is a really good idea to just like take a look at it once or twice a year. Just like go through it and be like, okay, are there any weeds that need to be pulled here? Oh no, I missed that typo. Oh no, like that kind of stuff, just so that you're taking fresh eyes and looking at it. That isn't something that you have to do by yourself. You can pair with, other folks that are sort of have similar goals and say, let's exchange. Tell me what you see with fresh eyes, totally different perspective. I've been looking at this for like my whole life. I can't see it anymore. We all get to that point with a story. And so do it with your, peer editing is a really great thing to do with your LinkedIn as well. And of course, your girl is here for you. If you are not in LinkedIn for Journalists, find the group on LinkedIn, join it. They do regular trainings on LinkedIn. Like, I feel like they do it every quarter. And the training itself is like, it's fine. The good thing is that once you finish the training, you get a free year of LinkedIn Premium. And LinkedIn Premium is the hotness, y'all. It's the hotness. If you go to LinkedIn right now and search anything in the search box, what you're going to see, the order of the people that you're going to see is first you're going to see your first connections who are LinkedIn Premium, and then your first connections who are not LinkedIn Premium, and then second Premium, second non-Premium. You see what's happening, right? And so when you can use it as a really great reporting tool, like legit, it is a good reporting tool, but also it's really good for your professional brand. It increases the quality and quantity of your inbound inquiries from recruiters and hiring managers, because you automatically show up higher in the list just because you have a premium account that you ain't even have to pay for. And so if you go in there and you see that they have a training going, do a favor to your fellow journalists as well. Let people know in the newsroom that like, hey, this is happening. Is there a way that everyone can attend or try to attend? They are really good about like letting anybody who is in a newsroom, if you got a newsroom domain, you are in, and it's really, really great. And I'm very glad that I still have like 8 months on mine before I have to pay for it again. It is expensive. It is expensive.
Well, I was just going to say, I wish I had talked to you before I gave them my credit card number, because they're taking $60 a month out of my account. But Deepa.
Yes, I'll try to be brief, and I have a couple related questions. I'm Deepa. I'm a producer at NPR. This is a great presentation, so thank you. What are the conversations sounding like when you are reaching out to your network, and how are you making sure that it doesn't come across as transactional? And then my last question is, how do you build relationships with strangers?
Okay, so I'm going to answer the first one, the second one first, because that one is hardest for me. So as I mentioned, I'm an introvert. You might think I'm not, because I'm like, presentation lady. That is me turning it on. And I really struggle with meeting new people. It brings a lot of anxiety for me, and I have to really like put myself in the mindset where instead of thinking of all of the things that will go wrong if I am awkward and people think that like my quirkiness is unprofessional and like all of these things like are happening in my inner critic in the background. But I also have the parallel narrative of every time I have put myself out there, something good has happened. And so even though my inner critic is saying, you're so quirky and your dress doesn't fit very well and you look weird and like you put on too much makeup and people are going to think you're unprofessional, like my inner critic is saying those things to me right now. But I have this parallel narrative where, because I have been doing it for so long, I've forced myself to power through enough times, and I've built the mental habit of switching the what if to what will you do if, that it puts me in a position where I'm willing to take the risk anyway, that I'm willing to sit up here with all of my insecurities and tell you about them and be here anyway, because all of the history tells me that good things will happen. And they might not be good things that happen to me. It could be the good things that happen to you. I personally value that just as much. And that is the thing that powers me through the anxiety of meeting strangers. Another thing that is helpful is having a really good professional pitch. I have spent a lot of time making sure that my LinkedIn is in really good shape, making sure that my resume is in good shape, and being in a position where I can drop an elevator pitch very, very quickly. And so that means that my brain doesn't have to work as hard to introduce myself to a stranger, which is the hardest part, because once you go back and forth a couple of times, it just becomes a conversation and it's fine. It's just getting over that hump of like, hi, new person. Hi. And once you get through that, then you can have a good conversation and it's not that big of a deal. And that transitions to your first question is, how do you have those sorts of conversations? What do those conversations look like and sound like? And how do you do them in a way that isn't transactional? Mutuality and reciprocality are incredibly important. You need to be just as curious about them as you want them to be about you. You need to put in just as much effort that you want them to put into you. If you're going to a stranger, time is our most valuable asset. I am never going to get this moment ever again, and I have chosen to spend it here with you. And so When you are asking someone, hey, can I pick your brain for 30 minutes? That 30 minutes, they are never getting that back. If they spend it on you, they are never going to be able to spend it on anyone else. So you need to show up with mutuality and reciprocality and showing investment in them if you are going to ask for investment from you. And the easiest way to do that is to just Google them. What is the most recent thing that they have said, posted, published? What's something going on with if they are, internet lurkers? Has their employer done something interesting? Is there something going on in the industry that what is the reason why you are reaching out to them? How can you be specific and direct about what that is? And how can you show respect for their time? The first time that you are reaching out to someone that you've never spoken to before, I do not recommend asking for time. I recommend asking one specific question that they can answer in 2 or 3 sentences so that you can get a reply. Because a reply turns into a conversation can turn into a call can turn into an opportunity. That, if you try to hack that chain and go from stranger to opportunity overnight, sometimes it works, but most of the time you end up with crickets. And so be patient, which is also part of the reason why being consistent and doing it a little bit over time, that means you have time to build up those relationships so that you have them when you need them versus having to sprint and create them because you got laid off yesterday and you never did anything with your networking.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate
You're welcome.
you being here and sharing all your input for free. So thank you. My question is, so many of us, I think, have talked about the professional development within our own organizations, within our own newsrooms. How do we navigate those conversations with our managers without being in a polite way with that, you know what I mean? Where you're like, hey, I'm interested in doing this other thing in the newsroom, which is maybe different from the job that we're doing right now, without coming across as so, you know what I mean? I'll be more specific. I'm a producer on a national program and I'm more interested in reporting, right? Which is not a part of my daily job right now. So I've had those conversations with my managers. They're like, cool, that sounds great. They haven't really backed me up. So I'm going to take my professional development into my own hands and start having conversations. Is that awkward? And how do I navigate that?
I'm going to throw that question back to you. Should whether your boss thinks something is awkward change the decisions you make for your own career and your own future?
Mm-hmm. But I also don't want to burn a bridge. I'm still showing up and doing my work, and doing well.
I appreciate you, but you did not answer my question.
I guess it doesn't matter then. Yeah.
So it's not that it doesn't matter, it's that it should not be what calibrates your compass. How other people feel about you should not decide how you feel about yourself. And if you are so worried about whether somebody is going to think it's awkward or pushy, or I can't remember all of the things that you do, the specific words. If you're worried about those things more than you are worried about not being able to take your career in the direction that you want to go in, you're going to be stuck in a career that you have to live with because of what other people may or may not think.
That is a word.
Thank you so much. My name's Amanda. I'm a reporter with the Boston Globe, and I had 2, I hope, quick questions. The first is, when we're thinking about the kinds of people that we should be reaching out to for networking, what do you recommend? Should we be primarily thinking about people who are sort of at our level? Should we be targeting people who are a few steps ahead of us? As I'm asking this, I'm thinking probably some of it depends on what our goals are, but curious your thoughts on that. And then also, you had mentioned some of those sort of financial, kind of just being tapped into financial literacy. And I was wondering if you had just a couple accounts that you recommend we
My
follow.
lawyer won't let me do that.
Okay.
So your first question, which I'm happy to answer, is that it does depend on your goal, but think about it in terms of what does the pie chart look like? Because a lot of times when I'm talking to coaching clients who are sort of disillusioned with networking, it's why are you, you're 2 years out of your career, out of college, and you just started your first reporting. Why are you trying to network with editors-in-chief? That doesn't make sense. And if that's the only thing that you're doing, then you're generally interacting with people that you can't create mutuality with. An editor-in-chief is not going to be able to get anything from someone with 2 years of reporting experience. It would be fully that they are giving to that person. And some people are really into that. Humans love helping, but it is difficult for one random stranger to get that out of someone who is so far ahead of them in their career. On the other hand, people who are sort of close to you where you are in your career, who are one or maybe 2 steps ahead of you. Those are going to be folks where it's going to be a lot easier for you to get them to say yes. And it's also going to be a lot easier for you to create some mutuality and reciprocality. I tried to answer that one short.
Hi, Phoebe. My name is Rafael. I work for the Arizona Republic. This has been a great session. I really appreciate all of your response and your time. But I have a question, something that stood out to me in your presentation when you talked about looking at your passions and seeing how you can potentially monetize or, look for patterns that, could work. And I'm wondering if you have any tips or suggestions whenever, for example, like, to use like my personal experience, I love spending time outdoors, I love hiking, and I think that there's an opportunity there to do like more sort of like profiles or writing about, stuff outdoors. But I'm wondering if you have suggestions or recommendations on how to approach your newsroom, because, that is also going to require, your time and whatnot. But how do you then, make it easier for them to say yes so that they don't see any sort of conflict?
Yeah, so that's actually me stepping out of career coaching and back into audience development. Think about like whoever it is that you would be in the decision-making process for that story. What do they care about? Do they care about impact? Do they care about audience? Do they care about traffic? Do they care about revenue? Do they care about this random KPI? How many people are subscribing to the newsletter? Like, what do they care about? And how can you frame this opportunity or that story as being in service of the thing that they care about? Yes, it's in service of the thing that you care about. You want to write about the mountain, but if they think that you writing about the mountain is going to increase newsletter conversions and that's the thing that they care about, they're going to be like, yeah, go write about the mountain, man. But if you say like, I really like mountains and I want to go write about them, is that cool? They're going to be like, I don't care about that. And so this is anytime you are asking anyone for anything, you are in a negotiation. And the best negotiation tip is turn your adversary into a collaborator. If you're thinking about the person as someone you have to win against versus someone you are collaborating toward a shared solution to a shared problem, you're going to be a lot more successful. So think about the people in the editorial chain and what they care about, and then frame the story or frame the initiative or whatever as being in service of the thing they care about.
And I guess my question was kind of more so like if I want to do that on the side to make that extra money to build the bigger pie.
That's going to come down to the policies. And so make sure that you know what the policies are for sort of moonlighting and freelancing and that sort of thing. And if the policy is you can't do that, then you can't do that. But if the policy is that that's okay, then make sure that you follow the policy. Sometimes you have to inform people, sometimes you don't. Just make sure you know what the policy is.
Now to thank Phoebe for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.